Hello and welcome to another Sprues and Brews video. Today we are having a look at Codex Genestealer Cults, the latest codex release for Warhammer 40,000, up for pre-order today, alongside the new Custodes Codex, which we've also reviewed. I'll link the video for that one. We've also got write-ups of both of these books over on the website as well, so yeah, if you want to have a bit more of a deep dive into what's in the book, head over there. But yeah, this is the new codex for the Genestealer Cults. Obviously the last book that they had was for the previous edition of the game, and I think it's safe to say that a few things needed updating in the new edition to bring the Genestealer Cults in line. A lot of the mechanics they had, such as, you know, the entire army starting in reserves and popping up around the table, is kind of what you can do with other factions anyway in 9th edition, so they really did need something to make them unique, and thankfully they have got it in the new codex. Now, one thing I just will jump into first is that, yes, like with the previous codex, you also get a sheet of tokens as well. So these can be used as your blips for your kind of hidden deployments, and they've also got another side on them to use as crossfire, which is a new mechanic that the Genestealer Cults have got in the book. So put that to one side. But yeah, it's really cool. I've got a Genestealer Cults army, Rusted Claw, just because I like the colour scheme of them really. And yeah, I've been looking forward to seeing these guys get some new goodies for the new edition of the game. So let's crack this open and have a look to see what they get. So as ever, with the other kind of 9th edition releases that we've had, the book is gorgeous, filled with loads of lore and artwork and all that good stuff. Lots of new artwork as well as old artwork that's been reused from the previous book as well. Again, if you've seen any codexes, you know the situation here. The first half of the book is kind of lore and information. We've got some stories in here, we've got information about the various unit entries, some information about the various cults themselves, along with some new stuff, like Chalnath was the location of the recent Kill Team box. We find out what the Genestealer Cults have been up to at the same time, which is cool. I imagine that might tie into the new kind of season thing that 40k is going on. If you don't know, basically every 6 months there's going to be a different season with a different storyline going through, and I am interested to see if any of the, well, speak of the devil, Vigilus, any of the planets and locations encountered in those seasons get fleshed out in the codexes, because normally that's not something they do. They keep that just for the narrative supplements and campaign books and stuff. Obviously this and the Custodes will be the last two books under the old structure of the release schedule, so I'm interested to see how things change when we get to that new season format, and hopefully very soon we'll be able to show some of that on the site as well. But yeah, as ever, once we've got through the lore section, you get onto the kind of miniature showcase featuring the entire kind of studio army, all the various unit options. We also get a couple of different schemes in here to show a few of the other cults. I think Four Armed Emperor is the main kind of scheme that the studio's done. But we do get some Rusted Claw and some of the other factions in there as well, to give you some ideas of how to paint your force, which is really nice. But yeah, I imagine what most people want to see are the rules themselves. And yeah, there's some really cool stuff in here. So the Genestealer Cults have had a bit of a revision from the previous book. Some of the stuff that they had previously, they've still got. A lot of stuff is new or has changed completely. So before we jump into it though, just want to call out, we've got the details of the combat patrol here, and it looks like it's a pretty good one. It looks like you get 2 boxes of neophytes, a box of acolytes, a box of aberrants, and a Goliath, which is a really nice mixture of stuff. Oh, and a Magus to lead them all as well. So looks like a pretty decent set. We don't know when this is up for pre-order. It's not up for pre-order today alongside the codex, so I can only assume this is coming out a little bit later. But yeah, it definitely looks like a fun one. But yeah, the rules themselves. So we get some cool stuff here for the Genestealer Cults. Again, like I say, some of this is similar to what they've had in the past, some of it is brand new. First of all, with the Gene Sect rule, you can only take a maximum of each character within a Genestealer Cults army once per detachment. So if you want to have multiples of the same type of character, you are going to have to take different detachments for them, which is fair enough, I guess. It stops you from spamming those units without having it across multiple detachments. Now, one of the problems that Genestealer Cults players used to have in the previous edition was we've got so many characters scattered between the HQ and the elite slots. It was often difficult to get them all to fit in an army without taking multiple detachments. Well, in the new book, the Gene Sect rule allows you to take a character without taking up a detachment slot for every character you take in the HQ slot. So if you take 3 HQ characters, that unlocks another 3 characters you can take without actually using a slot on the force organisation chart. Really, really good. Nice way of fitting in all those characters. There's still no way of fitting every character in a detachment, a single detachment, but that definitely gives you a lot more options. And as we'll see in this book, the Genestealer Cults have got such a heavy elite section. You really do need ways of cramming more characters in, so that's definitely a really cool thing. The other rule they've got is the Brood Coven. So this basically dictates what character can be the Warlord. So if you've got a Patriarch, he has to be the Warlord. If you don't, then a Magus or a Primus is, and if you don't have one of them, one of the other HQ choices can be your Warlord. Non-HQ choices can't be your Warlord, so basically that limits you to the Jackal Alpha and the Icon Ward as your options for HQ. All the other characters are now in the elite section of the book, so yeah, I like that. It makes sense from a lore point of view that the Patriarch would be the leader of the force if he's in place, and if not, one of the other kind of like cult leaders. It doesn't really make sense that your Reductor Saboteur would be leading the force, and that also stops some kind of gaming the system with some of the Warlord traits as well. So yeah, quite like that rule. As we saw previously, we've got a cult creed, so each different cult has got its own special rules that give you different things. We'll have a look at those in a little bit. This book also introduces the ability to create your own cult. So there'll be a list of different features. You can choose which ones you have to create your own cult of your dreams. So we'll look at those in a little bit. Another thing that's changed in the book is Brood Brothers. So previously there was some Astra Militarum choices within the book. They have all been removed now. Instead, for each Genestealer Cult detachment, you can take an Astra Militarum detachment. And as long as that Astra Militarum detachment is only 25% of your points or power level of your entire army, you don't lose any of your Genestealer Cult's benefits. So all the stuff that we'll see in a little bit, such as crossfire and stuff, you get to keep as long as you stay within that points threshold. So I know that will affect a lot of people's armies who've gone heavy into the Astra Militarum side. I mean, realistically at that point, you really should just run it as Astra Militarum army. I think the idea is that at its core, this army is Genestealer Cult. However, up to 25% of it can be Leman Russes, Valkyries, that kind of stuff. They do get some bonuses for being in a Brood Brothers detachment. The entire detachment gets +2 leadership, which is pretty cool. And they get access to the Unquestioning Loyalty ability, which we'll see in a bit. Basically allows you to pass off wounds from your characters onto your infantry. So you can soak those up with your Brood Brothers, that's fine. What you're not going to see anymore is a Astra Militarum heavy Genestealer Cults army. And honestly, I think that's a good thing for the game. I hope we see something similar when Chaos Space Marines get out, allowing them to take a small detachment of Traitor Guard. And likewise with Demons in the Chaos armies as well, allowing 25% of the army to be taken from the Demon book as well. It'd be really cool. It kind of harkens back to the old 2nd edition ally rules, where you had percentages that can be taken from different codexes, and it's kind of a nod to that, and I think it works really. So yeah, that's the kind of core rules. We'll see some later on when we get to the data sheets. We will have a look over the various cults though. So we get all the same cults that we had previously. So the Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, they're able to re-roll charges, and if you shoot them outside of 12 inches, you're treated as being in light cover as well. So that's pretty cool for them. They get a Warlord trait, Inscrutable Cunning. Basically it reduces the CP of your stratagems, and then there's a stratagem that you can use that increases the CP of enemy stratagems as well. So lots of stratagem shenanigans there. They get a pretty cool sword. It's low damage but high AP and gets a load of attacks. You get 4 additional attacks if you use it. Pretty nice to throw on your Primus or something. And you've got a Psychic Power Undermine that subtracts from movement, halves advance rolls, and subtracts 2 from charge rolls, so kind of limits movement. They're pretty cool. They're kind of like the classic Genestealer Cult army. We then got the Hive Cult. So these guys are pretty good if you want to take a kind of shooty foot-based force. So they can fall back and shoot, which is pretty nice. They can also do actions if they fall back or advance or shoot as well, which is really, really cool. So yeah, that's pretty handy in order to get some of those objectives that require you to do actions. They are pretty nice. We have got the Bladed Cog. These guys have got an army-wide 6+ invulnerable save. Whenever they shoot or fight, they can reroll 1 wound roll for each unit that attacks. And then they can add 3 inches to the range of their weapons as well. So that's pretty cool. We've got the Rusted Claw. These are the guys that I personally use. If they're attacked with a weapon that's AP -1 or -2, they reduce that by 1, which is pretty nice. And then also, when they move or advance, they count as stationary for the purposes of shooting. So that is really cool. They're a nice quick force. Yeah, really like them. They get a cool stratagem as well, drive by demolitions. So they can actually lob a demolition charge within the movement phase. Basically a unit that they've moved within range of, they can throw a demolition charge. And rather than rolling for the number of attacks that it gets, it automatically gets 6 attacks. So that's really nice for them as well. We then have the Pauper Princes. These are the guys that are on Vigilus. Each time they make a melee attack, if they charged, word charge, or perform a heroic intervention, they add 1 to the hit roll. That's pretty cool. And they basically ignore any modifiers for combat attrition. Pretty nice. Twisted Helix is a really nice one if you want to go for a very aggressive close combat force. They add 1 to the strength of all models within Twisted Helix, which is cool. Add 1 to the movement, and whenever you attack them, a wound roll of 1 or 2 always fails. So yeah, they're pretty tough. I quite like them. I can see some people doing some kind of combat heavy armies, especially since a lot of those units have been improved in this book as well, which we'll see in a little bit. So if you don't want to go for one of the kind of core cults, you can create your own. So you get 4 points to spend on this, and there's a whole kind of suite of abilities that you can spend them on. So for 4 points you can just have a splinter cult, and that's essentially lets you use the rules of one of the other cults, but make it your own. That's pretty fun. However, what you can do is mix and match some cool abilities. They've all got different costs depending on how powerful they are. So Impassion, for example, costs 3. So each time a model makes a melee attack, add 1 to the hit roll. With that then, you could pick any of the 1 point abilities to take with it. So for example, you could have every time a vehicle or bike would lose a wound on a 6, the wound is not lost. Pretty nice. Equally, you could have 2 2-point abilities or 4 1-point abilities, letting you mix and match and get some fun stuff there. A lot of the stuff that we see across the kind of named cults is on here, but there's also some unique stuff on here as well. So yeah, I think there'll be some fun creating some custom cults using these, which is pretty cool. As with other 9th edition codexes, we also get a whole load of stratagems. I'm not going to go through them all, but I'll pick out some of my favourite ones. So Reckless Demolitions is a really cool one. It lets you always hit with grenades on a 2+, which is great for your demolitions charges and stuff. However, if you roll a hit of 1, a model is destroyed to represent you just flinging grenades all over the place. So that's really fun. Sadly, the stratagem that lets every model in a unit fire a grenade is no longer here, so that's a shame. But, you know, I think that was a bit of a one-trick pony, and I think it was needed to be removed. And there's other stuff in here that kind of replaces that anyway. There's ways of going back into reserves in the shadows. There's ways of healing wounds on your characters. There's a really cool one that your Atalan Jackals, if they're nearby an enemy unit, other units in your army treat them as exposed. We'll see the rules for kind of crossfire exposed in a bit, but there's lots of things that interact with that new mechanic. So again, I think there'll be a bit of a finesse army, and a lot of these will interact with each other, and a good player will be able to do really well with them. There might be a bit of a learning curve for people who are maybe new to it, but once you've got the basics down, there'll be some nasty stuff that you can do. Another new thing that they've introduced within this book is proficient planning. Now essentially these are upgrades that you can give to different units that have different abilities. So for example, Your Biophagus, you can upgrade him for, 15 points, and it allows you to upgrade an aberrant unit basically during your list building step. So rather than having to roll it randomly during the battle, you get it when you construct your army list, which means in your first turn you can use your Biophagus to upgrade another unit, which is pretty fun. There's some really, really powerful stuff in here as well. So from every angle, that is a 10-point upgrade that lets a unit come out of reserves on turn 1. So if you've got a big, horrific combat unit that you want charging straight away at the start of the game, you can give them that upgrade and yeah, they can do it. Now you can only use each one of these upgrades once, and some of them can only be used on certain units. And obviously they've got a points value as well, so... And this is going to be a fairly elite army with points updates that they've had. But it allows you to tailor your list and get some kind of tricks in there based on your playstyle. So I think this is really fun, and there'll be ways of using those spare points that you've maybe got at the end once you've built your army list to give them a few upgrades. So again, I think that's pretty fun. We do get some warlord traits. These aren't massively different from the ones that were in the previous book, so we're not going to go too much into them. A few of them have changed a little bit. Prowling Adjutant's a new one that basically lets them move 6 inches when they're the target of a charge. So if somebody's just within charge range and they declare a charge on you, you can immediately move 6 inches and then you're outside of charge range, or move towards a unit that might be able to heroically intervene or get yourself in a bit better position to receive the charge. So that could be pretty cool. Other than that, most of them are pretty much the same as what we had previously. The Broodmind discipline has changed quite a bit though. Most of these spells are much different than what we had in the previous book. A lot of the really powerful ones are gone. So previously we had the ability to shut down Overwatch. We no longer have that facility. So instead, Mass Hypnosis reduces the attack characteristic of models in the unit by 1, and the target has to fight last. Mind Control subtracts 1 from their hit roll, and if you beat their leadership, you subtract 1 for their leadership characteristic and subtract 1 for combat attrition test for them as well. Psionic Blast has changed a little bit. It just does D3 mortal wounds, and if the psychic roll was higher than their leadership, it just does 3 mortal wounds. Mental Onslaught again has changed. You now take 4 dice, you roll them, each 5+ does a mortal wound, you then roll 3 dice and roll them, each 5+ does a mortal wound, roll 2, roll 1, etc. Basically it ends when the target is dead or you don't roll any 5+s. So on that initial roll, if you don't roll any 5+s, that's it, the spell's over. So you've got some potential to do some mortal wounds, but not a ridiculous amount. So it is kind of capped in the fact that you've got a maximum of what, 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. Compared to some of the spells we've seen, I think Harlequins have got one where in theory it could just keep causing infinite mortal wounds. This does have a cap on it. Psychic Stimulus allows you one of your units to shoot or charge when it falls back, and also ignore the penalties for firing assault weapons in the same turn they advanced. That's pretty cool. And then Might from Beyond adds 1 to the attacks characteristic of a target unit. I think previously it added 1 to their strength as well. That's gone, it's just attack. So some tweaks there, and some of the super powerful ones have been toned down a little bit, but there's definitely some utility. And bearing in mind, you're going to have quite a lot of psychers across your army, you're going to be able to have a nice spread of these for your force. So on to the relics here. The only real difference here is there's a lot of kind of character specific ones that basically upgrade those abilities that they've already got. So the Clamvus, for example, can have 6 inches added to his range. The Nexus can get an ability similar to the previous one it had for gaining command points, sorry. So again, we'll see what his new rules do, but it gives you kind of the facility that he used to have. There's some cool stuff there. Obviously all of the cults have got their own specific ones as well. So Rusted Claw, for example, have got a cool one that basically lets them move through units when they move charge or advance. So it kind of gives you semi-fly, where you can just move through a unit when you charge and get into a better position. So yeah, some really fun stuff there. Also, as with previous 9th edition books, we get some specific objectives for them as well. So Shadow Operations is a fun one. The opponent puts down 2 objective markers anywhere on the table. There's some conditions where they can put them, so they can't be within 9 inches of a board edge, or within 9 inches of another one of the markers. And basically you have to try and do an action on it, and the quicker you can do an action on each marker, the more points that you get. So if you manage to do it turn 2, then you get 9 points scored, and it goes down as the game goes. Now, considering we saw that upgrade earlier where you can get someone out of deep strike on turn 1, there's a very good chance that you can get 9 points for at least one of them, and then obviously put a lot of pressure on the other one and try and get a big chunk of points. So I think that's a pretty fun one to play. Battlefield Supremacy, equally, is one that really plays off the Genestealer Cult's abilities to come out of reserve and get into where they need to be. Basically, you get a point if you've got more models than your opponent in their deployment zone, a point if you've got more models than them in your deployment zone, and then a point if you've got more models anywhere else on the table. And again, considering you can pop your units up basically wherever you like, it's a pretty strong one. Purge the enemy is the final one, and this works around the crossfire mechanic, which again we'll look into in a little bit. You get a point if you manage to defeat a unit that had a crossfire marker on it. You get a point if you defeat a unit that came with a unit that came out of reserves, and finally you get one if they were exposed as well. So again, they're pretty good ones that go with the Genestealer Cult's playstyle, and I can see myself using any of these in games myself. On to one of the things that we really enjoy with the latest edition of the game though, and that is Crusade rules. So I think in all the books that we've seen for 9th edition, we've been really excited to look at the Crusade stuff. We tend to play Crusade more than any other form of the game. I know a lot of people watching will be big into match play. I really do think that Crusade is one of the best parts of 9th edition, and especially books like this that really kind of capture the essence of it. So basically, all of the books that we've seen have got kind of a gimmick around the Crusade, what they're trying to do. For the Genestealer Cults, it's really, really cool. They are trying to take over a planet. So when you do your Crusade force, you pick a world that you're trying to take, whether it be a hive world, a forge world, a cardinal world, a fortress world, an agri or mining world, or a frontier or feudal world. Based on what you pick, they've got different territories that you're going to take over. And after each game, you roll the dice. You're trying to get a 4 to 7 to try and get an acquisition point, or an 8 to get 2 acquisition points, and that's modified by various stuff during the battle. So if you win the battle, you get a point. If you manage to do any kind of shadow operations, you get a point. But if you had any high fleet units, you lose a point, because it's a little bit obvious a load of big gribbly aliens. You're not quite covert then. And then, yeah, basically each game you're trying to slowly take over this world. Once you've got 3 points, you can take one of those core parts of the world, and yeah, you get some benefits based on that. So based on what type of world you take over eventually, you will get a buff that can run for sometimes the next game, sometimes the entire kind of like campaign. There's also an interesting mechanic where basically your Genestealer Cult is going through various generations on the planet. So as you are kind of early in the stage of taking them over, you're more human looking, you're slowly infiltrating the place. As you get to the later generations, then yeah, the game's kind of up there. People are starting to realise what's happening, and that's really cool. And there's a mechanic built in the Day of Ascension where there's a chance that your cult is discovered before, you know, before the big gribbly Tyranid fleets come to consume the planet, and you play like a one-off kind of like cinematic battle where your cultists rise up across the planet and try and overwhelm the planet. Really, really cool. There are some penalties that might happen to you if you fail that. You get less command points because you're not prepared for it, but you ignore kind of morale checks because you're so frenzied and trying to do it. Really, really fun mechanic. I can see a lot of people starting some new crusades to try and capture this kind of thing. Some of the books that we've seen haven't been quite as involved from a crusade point of view. This is probably one of the more detailed ones with lots of stuff going on. I really like that, and it really kind of captures the essence of crusade for me. As ever in the other books as well, we get some examples of some of the studio armies as well and what they've done with their crusade forces. So we get Sam Pearson's Genestealer Cult army in this one, which looks really cool, and again gives you an idea of what you can do with your own models. So going into the main kind of rules for the Genestealer Cult though, like I say, there's quite a few things that have changed from the previous iteration of the army. Some of them a little bit, some of them massively. So first of all, as with the previous book, your army can conceal. So basically, you can either deploy them as a blip using the the tokens that we saw earlier. You put a token down, and then at the end of your opponent's first movement phase, or your command phase, depending on who went first, you then basically place models where those blips were to represent what was hiding there. That's pretty cool. Alternatively, instead of that, you can set your models underground. So if they're infantry or bikers, instead of putting them as a blip, you basically put them in reserves. But it kind of replaces the standard reserve rules. If you want to be able to charge, you can place them anywhere on the board outside of 8 inches of enemy unit. So ordinarily in most armies that's 9 inches, so you get an extra inch there, making those charges a little bit more likely. If you want to forsake charging, however, you can instead put them more than 6 inches away. Amazing, you can get all your weapons in range, you can force some crossfire and explosion when we get to that part. Really, really fun. Obviously you can't charge if you do that, but it gives you so many more tactical options. It also means that there's smaller windows that the opponent can try and screen and stop. It's going to be harder to stop you coming in from reserves, which is potentially a problem that the Genestealer Cults could have had. The fact that you've got the freedom to say, actually, you know what, I'm not going to charge, but I'll put my unit just outside of 6 inches of an enemy unit, really puts some threat on the enemy force. So that's really, really fun. They also get the unquestioning loyalty rule. So again, this is something that we saw in the previous book. It's just been tweaked a little bit here. Basically, your characters, once they fail a save, can instead cause a nearby unit to be killed instead of them taking the damage on a roll of 4+. Your Patriarch triggers that on a 3+ now, so that's pretty fun. The biggest new addition to the book is probably Crossfire. So this is a new mechanic, that a new keyword that units have got, Crossfire. Most of your units have got it. And basically, if you can shoot a unit and hit it at least 5 times with damage 1 weapons, or once with a weapon with a damage of more than 1, you put a Crossfire marker on it. Again, using the tokens that are supplied with the book. Every other unit that shoots a unit with Crossfire on it then gets +1 to hit, making it much easier for you to shoot those targets. There's another twist in that though, called Expose. If your unit can draw a line to another friendly unit and go through an enemy unit, that enemy unit is exposed. The advantage of that is that in addition to the +1 to hit, you also get +1 to wound, which is massive. You know, you've got strength 4 shotguns in here. If you can get a unit of, I don't know, acolytes behind a unit of Drakari, also hit them with your flamers to easily get the 5 hits to put a crossfire marker on them. Your unit of neophytes on the other side then shoots them with the shotguns. Normally they'd need 3s to wound. When they're exposed, they need 2s to wound. And obviously that can affect some tanks and really tough units as well. Your heavy weapons become even more reliable when you're adding +1 to wound, and basic weapons can start to maybe even scratch some of those heavy targets. So there's some really, really fun stuff that you can do with that. There's another layer on top of that as well, is if a unit is exposed and it's crossfired and it's within 12 inches, they also don't get the benefit of cover as well. So yeah, there's lots of sneaky stuff you can do on here. Again, using those ambushing rules to get your units into decent positions and making sure that when you shoot, you're exposing the opposing unit. That is going to be so, so strong. Again, it is going to be a bit of a finesse army, and if clever players are playing against you, they will try and make sure that they don't get in a position where they are exposed. But on a good player, I think you can do some really nasty stuff with this. I think it's really fun, and it kind of represents how the Genestealer Cults would work as well, popping up here or there and blocking off escape lines and stuff, so it looks really fun. The other new mechanic that the Genestealer Cults have is Summon the Cult. So this represents the fact that there's an endless supply of cultists who are ready to step up and replace their fallen brothers. It's kind of a bit like the kind of undead abilities in Age of Sigmar, where you can raise models every turn. And basically, any of your units that have got banners, so that's your Metamorphs, your Neophytes and your Acolytes, in the command phase they can get models back. So for your Neophytes, you get D6 models back if you've got a banner. and for your acolytes and metamorphs you get D3 models back. In addition to this, your icon ward can do the same ability on all core units. So that's all the units that we've mentioned, plus your Atalan Jackals. And again, that stacks with the banner that the units got themselves. There is a maximum cap, so neophytes can get no more than 6 models back, and all other units can get no more than 3 models back. But being able to get back 3 Atalan Jackals a turn, or 3 acolytes, or a unit of neophytes that's almost been destroyed and can bring 6 models back, that is crazy good. Your opponent's going to have to make sure that they destroy these units to the man, because otherwise you can just bring them back. Really, really cool. Really like the mechanic. Obviously the banners are more expensive because of that. I think they're about 20 points now, but in that 20 points you've got the potential to bring back so many models. It's really, really cool. What I didn't mention about the ambush earlier is that a lot of your characters have got abilities that trigger in the command phase. If you bring someone in from the conceal rule though, at the end of the movement phase, they get to use their ability that they use in the command phase when they come on the board. So what you can do is pop your icon ward onto the board from reserves and immediately bring back D3 Jackals if he's within range. So yeah, really, really cool. Interested to see how people build lists. Obviously they're going to be a little bit more expensive for those units, but big units, 10-man squads of acolytes that people took are going to stick around a lot longer because you can bring those models back. Likewise with your bikers as well, so really, really cool. Onto the unit entries. First of all, we've got the various heroes that were in the Shadow Throne box. These haven't changed at all from the profiles in there. Again, we saw a couple of changes compared to the previous edition, but not massive ones. So you've got like a reroll of hits of 1 aura on the Primus. Patriarch's got slightly less strength, but we've got more reliable damage on the claws. No changes from the Shadow Throne rules though, so if you've got those, you know what to expect. Next up, we've got the Icon Ward, so we've talked about him. He has got a 6-inch aura that adds 1-2 charge rolls. Again, really handy for your units. And he's got that banner that brings back core units. So useful. I think the Icon Ward's going to be a must-take. I'd take 2 of them if I could, but obviously with the new rule, you can only take 1 character per detachment. You are going to need a second detachment if you want to take a second Icon Ward. Honestly, I think he'd be in every list now. He's so good. Jackal Alphys is cool. The sniper rifle's changed quite a bit as well, so it's strength 5, AP -3, 2 damage now, with wounds of 4 plus doing additional mortal wounds to the target. They get to pick a target unit and a friendly unit, and then the Alphys and that target unit get the benefits of exposure against the marked unit. So again, it's all going to be about picking your shooting order, getting your crossfire markers down. Even if you're not in an exposed position, you can use units like this in order to get that +1 to wound on a target unit. So really, really good. Next up, we've got the Acolyte Hybrids. Again, I believe these were in the Shadow Throne box. Maybe they weren't. They've got an additional point of toughness now for the toughness 4. A lot of the melee weapons have been kind of folded down into a single profile. So the Cult Claws and Knife is basically their basic melee profile. It's now got -2 rend on it, making them a lot tastier. The other close combat options are a lot better now as well. So the drill is now AP -4, and every hit automatically wounds the target, which is really ace. And every unmodified hit of 6 does an additional 2 mortal wounds as well, so that's really tasty. The Rock Cutter is now AP -4 and 3 damage as well. So yeah, some really, really cool stuff. Obviously you can take the banner as well, meaning you can bring models back. These guys are going to be really cool. Neophyte Hybrids we did see in Shadow Throne. Again, no changes from those profiles. We've seen a lot of the weapons get better. Web weapons, basically if you can roll over the strength of the target, you do some mortal wounds to them. Shotguns are now strength 4 base. No needing to be within short range to use them at the full strength, so that's really cool. I'd argue that shotguns getting 2 shots, strength 4, factor in hitting exposed targets. I think the shotguns are pretty good, especially since you can pop things up quite close and be guaranteed to try and get that exposure rule on them, I think they're going to be pretty tasty. Again, you can give them a banner to get models back. I think it's a no-brainer taking banners on any models that can, just in order to keep your force going. So again, another decent troops choice. Next up, we've got the Pure Strain Genestealers. These have had quite a revision. They are now weapon skill 2+, making them really brutal in close combat. They get an additional attack each for 4 attacks, and their weapon profile's been kind of consolidated into one. Strength user AP -3. Brutal. So these things are going to be able to tear through enemy units. They also get a 4+ invulnerable save now as well, making them a lot more resilient. I do wonder, the fact that we've just got the one kind of weapon profile and it's kind of been compressed down a little bit, I do wonder if we see a new Genestealer unit in the future, maybe a new kit with different options. Perhaps, who knows, but yeah, they're a lot better. I think they're 3 points cheaper per unit model as well, which is really cool. Next up we see Hybrid Metamorph. So this is another unit that was probably left on the bench in the last edition because the other hybrids were just a lot better to take. They were troops, they didn't take a precious elite slot. These have had some nice consolidated profiles as well. So their basic weapons are now Metamorph mutations, meaning they hit on strength 5, AP -3. And you can give them flamers, making them pretty much Genestealers with flamers. And they've got a banner, so they can bring back models every turn. And then the old rule that let them fight after being destroyed in melee is now baked into the profile as well. So they just get that as a generic rule. I think they had to buy the sword and whip, I think, to get that previously. Now it's just baked into the main profile. So really nice choice, some decent changes on the unit. Speaking of decent changes on units, Aberrants have had a massive upgrade. They are now toughness 5 and have 3 wounds apiece. They subtract damage by 1. They used to have a wound shrug, but they don't have that anymore. But still, toughness 5 and 3 wounds and reducing damage by 1 is really, really good. They still cost 30 points, but you no longer have to pay for the weapons. And speaking of the weapons, the heavy power weapons are amazing. +3 strength, -2 damage, -2 rend, 3 damage. Really, really powerful. These things are great. Arguably the heavy improvised weapon isn't as good anymore, but it does allow you to put excess damage onto the unit. So basically if you hit one wound models with it, any of that wasted damage can be taken on other models in the unit, allowing you to maybe get through some of those hordes a little bit quicker. Arguably, I think the heavy power weapon's the best shot because it's just brutal and is a, you know, Primaris Marine killer. Really nasty. The Abominant has also had a bit of a change. He has moved from the HQ slot into the Elite slot. He still buffs Aberrants, but instead of his old ability, he now allows them to reroll hits. He does still have a 5+ wound shrug, and he still reduces damage by 1 as well. So I think he's come down in points. I think he's still pretty expensive. Allowing these guys to reroll hits might be nasty if you have a big unit of these guys. I think there's definitely a use for him. The Nexus and a lot of these other support characters have changed quite a little bit. So previously he used to give you command points. Now there is a stratagem or an upgrade earlier on in the book that lets you do that kind of thing. His built-in ability now basically allows you to use any of the aura abilities of your kind of support characters on a target unit anywhere on the board. Basically he's transmitting that aura to whatever unit he wants. Really, really good. I think he's fairly cheap from a point of view as well, so being able to transmit those abilities across the battlefield is really cool. Clamavus, the alien DJ, has had a bit of a change as well. So he can now allow units to do actions while shooting, which is really fun. He still stops units from coming down within 12 inches. He can stop combat attrition from being made, he just auto passes it. And he can also stop enemy units from doing actions as well. So I think this guy's going to be a pretty good choice for match play in his abilities to manipulate the action side of things. Locus is improved. He's proper bodyguard now, using a lot of the rules that other 9th edition bodyguards have. So essentially he picks a unit to protect. While he's within 3 inches of that character cannot be targeted by anything. He can't be shot. He can't be targeted in close combat until the Locus himself is dead. So yeah, really cool rule to keep your character safe. The Metamorph, everyone's favourite alien gunslinger, has had some improvements as well. His pistol's now got an 18-inch range and strength 5, which is crazy. It can ignore lockouts there, so we can take out kind of characters with it, and any unmodified wound of a 6 does a mortal wound on top of any other damage. He can still shoot twice, but he can now do that on any unit. He doesn't have to shoot a character to do it, so really, really cool. I think he's gained a 5+ invulnerable save as well. Yeah, he's really nice. Sanctus is better. I do think the sniper version is the best pick. Basically, he's got a sniper rifle that auto hits, strength 5, AP -3, 2 damage, ignores lookout sir, does mortal wounds on a 4+. He's really hard to hit. He's got a -1 to hit kind of aura. He improves his save by 2 while in cover. Again, he's going to be a really nasty one to stick in a piece of cover and just keep pecking away at enemy characters, finishing off support characters, or, you know, maybe characters that have fallen back and are trying to just stay alive on a couple of wounds. He can finish them off, so really, really cool model. We've got the Reductor Saboteur. Again, this is the same profile that we saw in Shadow Throne. Has got a really good anti-tank ability. I think they can do up to like 18 damage to a vehicle with their Assault 2d3, Strength 8, AP -3, 3 damage against vehicles or monsters, explosives. Really, really cool. Again, taking multiple of them would be cool to be able to just take out. I mean, like Tower Hammerheads, I think are going to be a threat in the near future. A couple of these can probably take out a Hammerhead a turn anyway. Obviously, if you did want to take multiples though, you would need multiple detachments because they do have the character keyword. The Biophagus has also changed quite a bit. So previously it could only buff aberrants, now it can buff any core unit, which is really cool. So that's all your kind of your main infantry ones, and your Atalan Jackals have got the core keyword as well, so they can buff them. If they're picking aberrants, they get to just pick which buff that they want. Any other unit has to roll. It's got quite a short aura, but with his little familiar, you can increase that to 18 inches. And as we saw earlier, there's an upgrade that actually allows them to just upgrade a unit during list construction as well. So definitely a lot more viable than he used to be. The buffs have changed though. So the first one is improve armor penetration by 1 in melee. The second one is an unmodified hit of 6 does 2 hits. And the final one gives them a 5+ wound shrug. Again, all pretty good stuff to throw on multiple different units now that you can give any core unit the buff as well. So again, another good pick. One of the problems with this book, there's so many of these elite choices that you want to take, which definitely means that ability to take a free slot per HQ choice is really needed here. Atalan Jackals have had a bit of an improvement. They've gained an extra wound each, so your basic bikes have got 2 wounds. They all have a 4+ save now as well, again making them a lot more resilient than they used to be. A lot of the weapon profiles have been folded together, so all their guns are now small arms, which is a 2-shot pistol at strength 4, and all their various close combat weapons are now just called Atalan Power Weapons, +1 strength, AP -2, making these guys really, really good. You can still give them, you know, mining lasers on the Wharf Quad. You can still give them demo charges. Demo charges are now 1 use only. They've got a fixed damage of 2. Obviously that strategy where you can all throw them doesn't exist anymore, but there's some cool stuff you can do. Obviously you're going to have to decide how many demo charges you take, because you're paying per demo charge and you can only use them once. But in the Rusted Claw, for example, you can throw demo charges in the movement phase. There's other stratagems that let you get the maximum number of hits from them as well. So definitely still a powerful choice. I really like the demo charges. These are a great little units. They also get a free 9-inch move at the start of the game as well. So on top of their basic movement 14, these are really quick as well. Speaking of quick, we've got the Ridgerunner. No massive changes from the previous one. They still get that 9-inch move. The flare launcher now gives them an invulnerable save rather than a wound shrug. Arguably the missile launcher is a little bit better now as well. It's strength 6 but gets 3 shots, AP -3, 3 damage, making it potentially more reliable than the mining laser, especially when you factor in the expose rule. Strength 6 with +1 to wound, it's arguably nearly as good, and you know how many shots you're getting and how much damage you're doing. So I can see a lot of people taking the missile launcher on the Ridgerunners now. The rock grinder and the truck, to be fair, have had similar improvements. So maximum movement is now 12. The range of the incinerator is now 15 inches as well, giving it a bit more reach. They reduce incoming damage by 1. They've got a 3+ save now, so they're a lot tankier. The drill dozer blade has had a bit of a tweak. It's slightly less strength. It's 2 damage now. I think it was D3 damage before, making it a bit more reliable. Had a bit of a game with these recently, and it was really hard to chew through a rock grinder with, you know, it's got a lot of wounds, it's got a fairly high toughness, decent save, reduces damage. It's a pretty good transport for throwing in a unit as well. Really like them. Same really applies to the truck as well. Obviously it's got more of a transport capacity, but doesn't have the kind of heavy weapons that the other one has. But again, both pretty good choices. So yeah, then as ever with the other books, we get a nice kind of little rules summary at the back with all the various profiles. We get a glossary, and we also get all the points values. So there's a lot of points changes across this book. A lot of things have got more expensive, some things have got cheaper. When you factor in things like the banners being 20 points now, some units are quite a bit more expensive, but you've got to bear in mind the fact that you can bring models back. I think it's going to take a bit of time for people to find the sweet spot with how many models they take in these units. You know, if you factor in the icon ward and the unit banner, being able to bring these units back, you could do quite a good kind of swarm army that just keeps coming back, and people have to go and focus down units one by one. It also gives you lots of potential to take advantage of crossfire and exposing units, and like I said earlier, even strength 4 shotguns with +1 to wound can hurt some things. So yeah, obviously the guard element is going to change some lists as well, with you only being able to take 25% and still keep the crossfire rules. You could choose to take a bigger guard detachment, but obviously you're going to lose those rules, and I do think they are quite powerful. Like I said at the start, I think it's going to be quite a finesse army to use, and it's going to take some time for people to get used to the different playstyle. Things have changed a little bit from the previous book, but I do think it's really, really fun. The Crusade rules are excellent. It really captures the spirit of how Genestealer Cults armies would work. I like all the updated profiles. Those units that we've not used in the past as much are definitely going to get played more now. And I think there's some variety that you can do as well. You can go super shooty, you can go Mad Max style bike army, you can go really aggressive combat army. There's a bit of variety here, and it's going to be interesting to see how the new season of 40k goes, and what kind of scenarios we've got, and if these are kind of like tailored to that. So yeah, that was a look at the new Codex Genestealer Cults for Warhammer 40,000. As ever, massive thanks to Games Workshop for sending us a copy of this free for us to review. I have got a full write-up over on the website, spruesandbrews.com, so make sure to check that out if you are interested in more on the Genestealer Cults. We do lots of unboxings and reviews and videos here on the YouTube channel as well, so if you've enjoyed this, why not give us a follow and see what we've got to come. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that. We have got the Custodies video up today as well, so I will link that in the description. It'll probably also play after this one as well. So yeah, that is also really cool. There's a load of stuff coming out this year for Warhammer 40,000, so yeah, we'll be watching it all along with you. So until next time, have a great day.